there is one piece of advice every quiet introspective person will have heard before. Maybe in a performance review, maybe in a feedback conversation, or maybe over a casual coffee with their manager. You need to speak up more. And you're not alone. And maybe you think to yourself, I know, I heard that one before. But what nobody really tells you is that that advice is probably the worst thing you could say to a quietly ambitious person. Not because speaking up doesn't matter, it does. Not because they wouldn't try hard enough, because believe me, they will. But because no matter how hard they try, that version of speaking up is never going to work. It sets them up for failure. And today I want to get into why and what to do instead. This is Awfully Quiet for quiet people with loud career ambitions. Visibility at work was built for a very specific type of person. Somebody who thinks out loud, who fills silence naturally, who speaks first and then figures it out as they go. And if that is not you, and I'm guessing it's not, you've probably spent a lot of energy trying to be more like that person. I know I have. And it's exhausting. Because all that energy you're spending on showing up differently is energy you're not spending on the thing that actually makes you good. So you stay stuck. Not because you don't have anything to offer, but because you're so focused on trying to be louder that you never figure out your own version of visible. But that's what's going to make a difference. So let's start with why the advice is wrong in the first place. Because when somebody tells you to speak up more, what they really mean is you need to be more visible. And the assumption underneath that is that visibility is a volume game. That if you just said more, took up more space, spoke up more in meetings, people would notice you more. But that is not how visibility actually works. Think about the people you find most credible at work. They are not always the loudest in the room. They are not always the one people actually listen to, actually trust, people think of when something important comes up. Visibility isn't about volume. It's not about being loud. It's about clarity. Are people clear on what you bring? Do they think of you for the right things? Now, before we get into solution mode, let's stay with what actually happens when quiet people do try and speak up more. Because I have certainly tried. I am so ambitious. Of course I would have tried if it meant more career opportunities at the beginning of my career. So you decide to speak up more. You go into the meeting and what happens? You spend half the meeting monitoring yourself instead of actually thinking. And whatever you say and contribute feels forced instead of considered. And slowly you start eroding the exact thing that makes you good. The depth, the precision, the quality of thinking that comes from actually processing something before you speak. So the irony is this. Trying to speak up more doesn't make quiet people more impressive. It often makes them less impressive because you're performing someone else's version of visible instead of figuring out your own. So the advice is well-intentioned. It's loud and it is wrong for you. So if visibility is about clarity, about other people being clear on what you bring, why is it so hard for quiet people? And I think the answer is actually a little bit painful because quiet people are often really good at the exact thing that creates clarity. The depths, the considered thinking, the ability to actually process something before speaking instead of figuring it out loud. The problem is that all of that happens internally. And if it stays internal, nobody sees it. You've done the work, you've had the insight, you've figured out the thing that nobody else in the room has figured out yet. But it never lands externally in the conversation, in the meeting, in the moment. It's like it didn't happen. And that is the real cost. Not that quiet people have nothing valuable to say. It's that the value stays invisible. And invisible doesn't get promoted. It doesn't get in the room where the kind of career opportunities happen that you would really like for yourself. So what do you do instead? Because I'm not going to tell you to just be yourself and everything will work out. That is not a strategy, that's a wish. The quiet alternative to speaking up more is to make your thinking visible. And those are actually two very different things. Speaking up more is about frequency. It's how often you talk, how much space you take up. Making your thinking visible is about something else entirely. It's about sending the right signal. It's about making the right people see the quality of what's actually going on in your head. And you do not need to be louder to do that. You just need to be more deliberate. Ask one well-placed question in a meeting that shifts the direction of the conversation. Send one follow-up message after a discussion that shows you thought about it longer and deeper than everyone else. Share your reasoning, your thinking, not just your answer. That's not performing. That is not forcing yourself to become someone you're not. That is just taking what you already have internally and being intentional with how it lands externally. And that is the quiet way up. What I want you to take away from this is that speak up more is not bad advice because speaking up doesn't matter. It does. It's bad advice because it's solving the wrong problem. Visibility isn't about being louder. It's about clarity. And the quiet rebrand, the thing I talk about on this show, starts the moment you stop trying to be louder and start being more deliberate, intentional, and more you. Now, appreciate that is not a small shift, but that's the whole game plan. If this landed, next week we're going to talk about why exceeding expectations is not the flex quiet people think it is. And honestly, you might need to come back for that one. Hit subscribe quietly.